we're looking at headlines now. The pound sterling, is now down at a low against the US dollar, which we haven't seen since 1985. That has an impact, doesn't it, on what we can get for our pound when it comes to defence procurement?
Yeah, it does. There are four cost drivers in defence. The first one is pay. Volunteer force is expensive. The second one is pensions, which go up by CPI every year. And the third and fourth one are affected by the dollar. That is Category A equipment programs, those over several hundred million, which some of those are obviously in dollar equivalents. For example, the F-35, the strike fighter of the RAF. And the last big cost driver is fuel costs. And of course, oil is priced in dollars. And you can hedge for so long in year, but then you have to pay the price. So the way that the pound is going down, and I remember it because I still have a US bank account from serving there, it was 140 when Brexit occurred. It is somewhere around 114, 115 today. That has a knock-on effect. That inflationary level, what you can buy, is affected by the dollar-pound comparison.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about now, pretty much as I speak, $1.15. To the pound. That is very low. And in material terms, Chip, what sort of things are we now going to find so much more expensive that are so important to our military arsenal?
Anything where we have a collaborative relationship with the Americans is going to go up exponentially. And of course, we were supposed to buy, for example, 148 F-35 planes. Whether we will be able to do that in the future will be a not known. But really, we already know the things that we need to do. It's whether we can do that in strategic terms. And I think we need to just forget about equipment for a moment, because there was, of course, a new eighth strategic policy from NATO, which came out of the Madrid summit in June. What we really need to do is make sure that we have the forces at readiness, which is going to be a struggle at the moment, to enable the three things that the new strategic plan said we should do. And that really was more forward deployment of combat units in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, Estonia in particular for the UK, more high readiness reinforcements and readiness both in terms of availability of equipment and sustainability of that equipment with the stocks of ammunition is pretty expensive. And the last one is more high readiness reinforcement forces. Now, all of that really was designed to have a thicker tripwire and be able to win the first fight. And at the moment, I think our ability to fight tonight is pretty degraded, both in terms of that availability and sustainability. And two of the things which have really been missing from the last series of defence reviews are reconstitution and regeneration. And that includes industry being expanded, if necessary, to provide those war ammunition stocks, which in a NATO context are probably fairly low at the moment.
Right. I mean, in this current strategic situation, these questions are really rather urgent. Now, in the new Liz Truss administration, we have that the Defence Secretary is still Ben Wallace, but we've got a new Foreign Secretary, James Cleverley. You'll know something of James Cleverley just through he's been there around the Foreign Office. But what are your thoughts on his accession to the Foreign Secretaryship?
Well, I think there's generally continuity in UK foreign policy, so I don't really see much changing. Certainly in terms of the policy towards Ukraine, I don't see that as a problem. I mean, I think that there is a role within both the Foreign Office and Liz Truss now that there is unity within the wider European and Western framework. We need to get away from all that campaigning stuff about whether France is the jury out being on whether France is a true strategic partner and friend. We don't want any of that sort of diplomatic fratricide when we concentrate on the real strategic issues. And Ukraine is one of those real strategic issues.
Right, let me get a bit closer to the ground in the conflicts in Ukraine now. I was reading an interesting report the other morning about Russia's problems getting hold of vital equipment for its military equipment. I'm thinking in particular of microchips, superconductors, which apparently is becoming a big problem for Russia.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, if you analyse the Russian economy at the moment, of course, the energy sector still looks fairly healthy, but the industrial sector looks absolutely awful, and the number of closures of plants, which could have an impact on cities which are sustained just by one industry. So the high-tech stuff, which is being not getting to Russia by the sanctions, is a real concern for them. And that is caveating the way that they will be able to fight the war. Precision guided munitions all need all that sort of high tech wizardry within them. We know that they fired over something like 3,500, probably more than that now, precision guided munitions. They're probably running low on that. If you're running low on that sort of stuff, it means you have to fight back to a kind of analog war rather than a digital war. And as the Ukrainians get better with the equipment given to them, and the surveillance and electronic warfare and the other gizmos from the West, the ability of the Ukrainians to fight smarter is what really comes to the fore. And that's what we're seeing in the way they're doing business at the moment, particularly in terms of recently, for example, not just the HIMARS for taking out the logistic bases and things like that of the Russians, but also forcing the air defense of the Russians back so that they're not brought into bear, which allows the smaller drones of the Ukrainians to help in the targeting in the close battle, in really three close battles at the moment. The first one we're seeing in Kherson, the second one with this sort of limited counteroffensive, which seems to be going on at the moment around Kharkiv, and the third one where they're still fighting a sort of forward defense battle in Donetsk.
I mean, I was reading about Russia taking microchips out of refrigerators to stick in high-tech munitions. It might have come to that. But equally, if it comes to choking off the supply altogether, that could be difficult, couldn't it? Because China, for example, may well be a ready supplier of these chips and superconductors to Russia. And how do you police that trade along that border?
Well, I think that's the real big strategic question in terms of that where that goes. Now we know, of course, that Xi is going to be meeting Putin next week. I don't think the strategic relationship is as it was supposed to be before the war started, when we recall that they had the meeting prior to the Winter Olympics. But that is the one to watch out for. I don't think China is a natural ally of Russia, right to the sort of 100th percentile of this. But that is the one to see, because the key thing for Xi, of course, is he's got the 20th Congress coming up in October, and he needs to sustain trade relationships with the West and the EU. And that is far more important to him ultimately than the trade with Russia, which is not very big.